the recording? Like, is it helpful to have the video?
I don't know. I can turn that off.
If somebody starts dancing like really cool moves,
It
would be great to capture that so we can learn those moves.
You know the Kubernetes. I do, yeah. But I prefer to practice it privately.
I do it on the shower once or twice a year.
So yeah, I guess we can go ahead and start. For those of you that aren't familiar, we've been doing about every 2 weeks, not completely consistent with that, but have been trying to get together through the Drupal.org Slack channels to talk about issues related to Drupal and Kubernetes. We've had a lot of conversations so far. You know, a lot of the initial ones were focused around file storage, object storage, being able to work with files in Drupal, what that means. We've had some conversations about build packs. We've had different lightning talks, but really it's just getting off the ground. So it's an open forum for anybody that would like to participate. Not really sure how to moderate this. I don't have an agenda. So one of the things that we like to do is maybe give people an opportunity to introduce themselves. If you're interested, maybe tell us a little bit about how you use Kubernetes, some of the challenges that you face with Kubernetes. There's a lot of people with common interest, common knowledge, and different levels of experience with hosting Kubernetes all the way up through production environments. So does anybody want to jump in and maybe say hello to the group? Maybe throw out a couple of questions.
I'm the new one in the group. So I wanted to join before, but it was like US time, stuff like that, so it's night for me. I'm working, my name is Alex. I'm working at Smile Open Source Technologies, and we use Kubernetes, but not for Drupal in production, but for some CI/CD workflows, something like that. And now we have several clients that want to move to Kubernetes for hosting Drupal sites. And we have like several projects in development right now. And I'm just wondering, I want to know all these issues before we launch the production. That's why I'm here. Today I just want to hear from you what you should have, what you're doing here.
All of the issues related to Drupal hosting.
It's going to be launched.
Nice. Nice to meet you, Alex. Anybody else maybe want to jump in?
I'm JP. We are 14, 4 of us. We are using Kubernetes for our own platform, powering all our web services and microservices and our customers. And although we were using GitHub for review apps to run pages last week. And later we want to move a step ahead by probably using KVS or local dev environment.
Okay.
And joining our second first, there's plenty of those. And we also have a project,
not one Drupal project which is running on Kubernetes. Azure, yes.
And are you doing managed Kubernetes?
For our own platform, it's 1980s, 2014.
Okay.
We hosted on our own servers. For clients, yes.
Azure.
Okay. Yeah, it's more. Although we see the issue of friends markets or price, looks like they can.
Microsoft's a pretty strong player there. They have Brendan Burns working for them. There's several core Kubernetes people that are involved with Microsoft, and I'm really curious to see what they end up doing in the future. I don't know how strong they are right now, so I'd be interested in hearing maybe just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, we have a time struggling this age.
All right.
Thank you, Christian. So, I'm Eduardo. I'm with my colleague Ismael. We are coming from CERN, which is this organization where we crash particles and try to find new things. We host the Drupal infrastructure there for internal usage. It's a self-hosting, 1,500 websites between Drupal 7 and Drupal 8. Nowadays, based on cluster, bare metal set of servers, pretty static, we would like to move forward and adopt all of these cloud native initiatives. We are looking forward on some operator pattern for deploying Drupal websites that we can adopt. So as a general, let's say, a common way of deploying Drupal websites within the community, but also customizing it for our needs because we have some constraints as an organization. Yeah, looking forward what the community or how the community can help us.
Well, one thing that we try to do that might need a little bit more help is there's a GitHub page that's linked from the Drupal.org Kubernetes Slack that has a list of resources. There's not a lot there, but I believe that there are some early patterns that are starting to be linked. And as we open source more and more things, specifically with the build packs and some of the other stuff that my company focuses on, that's where we'll add those links as well. So it might be a good place. I know Amazy, with their work with Lagoon, has quite a few of the operators that they've worked with open source. So it sounds like you're in the right spot.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Anybody else?
I'm running two production websites on Kubernetes from using the GitLab Auto DevOps flow. So I also have review and staging environment here. And it's deploying from a single repository with some configuration scripts, I think, for separate environments and stuff. And works quite well, except for the readiness probe. Or the liveness probe was the problem. When I push the cache, then everything dies, basically. So I stopped using HTTP probes, now using TCP probes. That was doing the same thing. Enthusiastic.
Cool. Okay. And my name is Sergey. I am in Fun work best, and we actually use Kubernetes for our internal services, which we use inside of the company, just for internal needs for like development and so on. And why we are here, we are considering that Kubernetes can be a basis for the next hosting platform. Actually, this is as we develop hosting management platform. And Drupal community is potential target audience.
Great. Great. There's a lot of opportunity here.
Yeah, so
yeah.
I'm Frederick. I work as a Drupal developer for the reference. We have one running production site, also Drupal, and then we have a new project. I created a cluster. Well, they gave us an Azure subscription with a cluster namespace inside the cluster, and I configured it with GitLab and Helm. First, I made the Kubernetes manifests, then I turned them into Helm, deployed them with GitLab. But I've been busy. I've been working on that for the last 3 weeks, and I learned a lot because before that I didn't really know a lot about Kubernetes. But it's been a good 3 weeks because I know more now. So
What do you think of Helm so far?
At the beginning, it was pretty confusing because there's a lot of variables and it's very overwhelming. But then when I started learning it, it seems very similar to the manifests, just a lot of variables into the. Well, it's good if you wanna just have one single point of truth where you can edit your values and then have the rest running. But it's easy to use when it's a hard learning curve, but when you know it, it's easy to use.
Yeah, and we've found that it is, there is that learning curve, and it does provide a lot of functionality, but there also becomes a point, which specifically with Helm 2, where it can get really difficult to debug issues, or when something breaks, it's hard to figure out sometimes. I know there's a lot of hope and excitement around Helm 3, but generally I know in our systems we've kind of strayed away from Helm and started moving more towards that operator controller pattern and using different templating engines and items like that. Right?
What are the alternatives for replace or Helm?
We've had quite a bit of success with customized three. That's the way DB has also been moving. Helm 2 has quite a few limitations to it that I think a lot of clusters.
Can you speak up a little bit as much as
what I'm saying is Helm has a couple of implications to it. Probably the most well known is the dependency on a daemon that needs to run on the cluster. Typically with superadmin, there are some techniques you can use to reduce the permission scope. Generally speaking, Tiller is typically required to get the full benefit from Helm. So the alternative that we actually have had a lot of success with actually is specifically customized version.
If Tiller is the only downside of Helm, it's going to disappear on Helm 3, as I heard from you. Right?
Yeah, I think Helm also took a stab at trying to solve the problem of how do we share components from the deployment. The repository pattern that they have, I think, would work with that. Customize, I think, is taking it to a different level where you can selectively layer different sources, for example, of deployments that have a customized directory. You don't even have to download it locally anymore. Just reference it from GitHub. And from there, you can actually build the deployment manifest that you need. The other thing that we are seeing a lot of benefit from getting away from is dynamic rendering of your manifests before you actually do the apply. I will add, I think one of the things that had plagued Helm 2 the most is the lack of server-side the three-way strategic server-side. That caused a lot of problems with Helm charts that we have slices of complex stress, for example, that get reordered.
So yeah,
we have a lot of problems with that.
Helm 3 RC1 I think was released overnight. So it's pretty close to actually a stable release of Helm 3, which is Tillerless. It has been a security pattern inspection deployments. But there's still some bugs. It can be difficult to manage. It's easy to set up and run, but that upgrade process can cause pain. So,
what do you think of the Lua? With the focus more on Lua?
Yeah, I've yet to actually try Helm 3 seriously, but yeah, I've had my personal challenges with Helm 2 as well. So my preference is definitely the operator model, managing things via CRDs. You can, and that way, yeah, that's another alternative. But you have to have an operator that's running in your cluster. That often has a specification, run a custom resource definition that can actually just manage your deployments through Kubernetes native approach to things. So.
I think Customize maybe also looking to address this with the plugin ecosystem.
Yeah, nice. And Customize is part of Kubernetes, isn't it?
Yeah, the 6 CLI.
Yeah.
I guess. So we maybe to kind of bounce. We've actually been having some a love-hate relationship with Helm, but actually a lot of success as well. One of the things that yes, templates in YAML, like YAML is one of the worst languages or markups that you can have, and then mixing that with templating, it's very messy. But at the same time, so there's this Helm plugin called unit test, and so pretty much we have unit tests for every configuration option that we have. You just say, I want this option, and then with these values, this is what I'm expecting. With these other values, this is what I'm expecting. it's been like making everything so much easier to refactor to make sure like just catch some indentation issues or things like that. So and it's not actually that much work. So with a proper measure, you can actually get something that's quite usable out of that. And I guess one of the things that's pretty nice is the way that you can separate the structure of your files from the kind of configuration options that you give to your users. So you can say, hey, you want to name this thing or have this variable, and then it doesn't actually need to match directly to all your resource or structures. And so, for example, what we've seen, we started using Ambassador for the ingress. We had some configuration for that, and then later on we realized Ambassador didn't work for some SSL certificate stuff that we wanted to do, and we switched out Ambassador for traffic, and we had nothing to change for the project configuration. Yeah, so that's the part where it's actually pretty nice to have this kind of abstraction that's like completely unrelated to the resources that you actually have.
So some of you that are maybe newer or dealing with smaller clusters, do you have any specific questions that you're bumping against or any challenges that you're trying to solve?
Is everyone using monitoring?
That's a good question.
Oh, monitoring?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my mandate is to do a lot with very little because I'm kind of like a one-man band inside of a, organization that's doing a lot of other things. So we're on GKE, and you get StackDriver basically free with it, which is not, it is what it is. But the nice part is that I think by and large, many people who are running Drupal don't actually monitor their application much at all. That's, it's a very broad statement, but like the database watchdog table is not a monitoring tool. You only go into it when something's broken. Like I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. So I think like baby steps just to like turn off dblog, turn on like monologue, and it's not entirely obvious, but like if you dump JSON onto a single line in your container log, StackDriver will parse it. So like, it's very easy to go from like dumping something to the container console and then having StackDriver consume it, and it's structured. So like that's a baby step, but we've run into like we sort of go anti-pattern and run cron inside of our containers because it's just easier to ship one container. It's a little anti-pattern to what you're supposed to, but we've had to do a little bit of extra sort of hackiness to get those logs to surface to the container log because they're running under cron. But it's totally doable, and it provides my client like way more visibility than they ever had before because it either worked or it didn't, but they weren't aggregating anything. So
we're definitely using Prometheus for main point of monitoring, just with Prometheus Operator.
You're using Prometheus Operator?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so I mean that gives you, even your default setup gets you pretty far. But writing the Prometheus rules and this monitor implementation is pretty straightforward once you get used to it. And then that comes with Alert Manager, which is also really useful. That's a real-time alert management system that will just expose issues across the cluster. So it's super handy.
Grafana is also good.
Sorry?
Grafana too.
Grafana, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and then I think at a recent catch up with guys in Australia who built the Prometheus Explorer for Drupal, which can expose a lot of Drupal metrics out to Prometheus as well, which you can shut up in the environment.
Have you checked any of this technical content?
If you go, I don't know the exact status of it, but if you go into we have a Google Doc linked in the Slack channel that has the notes that has the specific links to that project. So we can surface those if you'd like to explore it. Unfortunately, they're not here right now.
Yeah, but it's pluggable, so you can add it and all those things.
Yeah.
Monitoring. There is an effort to kick off at Econ Barcelona with open source project. Has anyone else been watching that project and in the direction that they're going in? For those who haven't heard, you can look at this at opentelemetry.io. The goal and objective behind the project is actually to also unify metrics, logs, and tracing using tracing. So
I was wondering, how are you guys serving your JS files? Because Drupal concatenates it and puts it in a files directory. I mean, in the normal files, you can put in some kind of object storage. But the JavaScript files, you want to serve from the same domain. So how are you guys handling that?
Serve them like the static files themselves. So we have a volume.
You don't have any cross-domain issues then?
Are you using like object storage and rewriting to?
I'm using Minio for object storage and then serving the static files from Minio.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, are you using a fly system at all?
Yeah.
So, I could maybe suggest a pattern. You could use CDN too. So you could basically like what I've done for that is like you'll have CDN rewrite the URL basically in front of Minio, and then you can serve the JavaScript and CSS separately. There's a flag and fly system, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing now. But when a container redeploys, then the files are gone, but the cache isn't gone because that's in Redis, and then it's serving this website without CSS.
But yeah, you should be able to persist your CSS aggregates too. So
yeah, CSS could be served.
Or your JavaScript, yeah, your asset aggregates. Yeah, you should be able to persist them.
And most of the examples we use just an Nginx proxy. So it's a similar case to your CDN, but if you don't have CDN, you do it all in Nginx.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a CDN. Yeah.
So we tried to use that and also had the same issues. And for us, we wanted to be able to migrate existing sites to this new setup without having to modify the application itself. So Fly System, for example, we didn't want to touch that because, and also for Drupal 7, it works differently and so on. So but we wanted to use object storage, and so so there's this project called rclone, which makes it possible to mount multiple cloud storage things, like anything from S3 to Dropbox or like weird things like that. And we wrote a small CSI driver that it just a wrapper around it, and it makes it possible to mount things. No, it's not using Q. So it's a CSI driver, actually quite minimal. Performance, it's nothing fantastic. It doesn't work for very large files, but we've seen that actually writing and reading, it's just fine. It's similar to like the hosted NFS solution from Google Cloud, and anyway, all of that is going to be cached by Varnish and by the CDN and so on. So we decided, like, actually, it's quite okay for now. And yeah, so it's we're the only ones using it so far. It could definitely use more testing, but so far we've actually been having some pretty good experiences with it. So if anybody is looking for this kind of solution, we'd definitely be very happy to have more people trying it out. And yeah, and we've been using it with the Minio as well for testing, and that works great.
What other types of problems have people been hitting, or questions that people might have?
Kubernetes randomly killing my pods. Sometimes I don't know why. But,
Yeah.
It's built to fail. That's
that's impossible to call.
How do you do your resource allocations and quota limits, items like that? How do you allocate the proper resources for your pods to continue running? Do you have a strategy for identifying that? Maybe we could talk about some different strategies to fix that problem.
That's it. Yeah.
I mean, we're taking a more permissive approach insofar as, like, I think I have been bit, and it's not entirely obvious that, like, if you can limit resources, but you can also reserve them, and reserving them costs you a lot of money in the sense that, like, you will reserve a lot of CPU and RAM that just sits there for your pod. So I'm trying to squeeze as much density as I can out of our cluster because we don't want to over provision and it's expensive. So we've actually taken sort of the approach of, like, most of our workloads are like brochureware websites that don't do anything, and so, like, reserving for them is not particularly helpful for us. So I've taken the approach of, like, limiting bad actors as opposed to reserving for good actors.
But then how do you prevent your cluster, like, do you use the autoscaler from the Google Cloud?
We're messing around with autoscaling and staging, but not production yet.
Because the problem that we had is that then it was trying to put too many things on the same limited resources, and it.
Yeah, you schedule best effort.
Yeah.
Which is the lowest tier.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know. I mean, maybe, we've got probably maybe around 100 clients kind of in total, and, like, it's not a commodity product, so, like, I'm not worried about, like, isolating people as much as maybe others, right? Like, because I can, but, like, our pods are relatively long living compared to a lot of others. Like, it's still web hosting, It's, and, like, most of our clients are not scaled because their applications aren't HA and they're not paying us for that. So, like, sometimes I think you can over-engineer some of that, right? Like, you can totally over-engineer the resource allocation. So, like, I've taken the approach of, like, we still monitor node level metrics, and if and then I aggregate by namespace. So, like, if I see a noisy neighbor, it's pretty easy to figure out who the noisy neighbor is.
We've found it's actually easier the bigger the cluster, because you obviously have more capacity to play with, right? So, one of the things we do with our HA clusters, we usually across 3 availability zones, and basically your 66% is your red line that won't be able to cope losing an availability zone. So that's where we sort of have to play with. So we often don't. It's very rare we get to a stage where we do have autoscaling, but it's very rare we get to that stage to trigger it. And pod prioritization has been a really, like, killer feature that we've rolled out in the last year or so, which basically means you can say your production sites can be production and non-production on the same cluster. Our production sites get the prioritization over any non-production, and that way that if we do have outages, they're the first to go.
We are using coverage and to support stuff like that.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, and for our bigger clients, and they're very specific about high availability. They're happy to pay for that sort of redundancy. And so that does make it easier, but it's not always the case. We do try and make it as dense as possible within those ranges, but we can spill over, but understanding that we can't cope with the failure at that point.
And I guess that there was also something for us to, a big learning, like making sure that you understand what those limits mean for CPU and for memory, because they behave completely differently. And also like making sure that you treat things. So like a PHP application, it serves a request, it uses a bunch of memory, and it releases that memory. And this is fine. And then there's, for example, database, which will keep that memory. And if you set the limit high over time, it will eventually reach that limit, no matter how high it is. And so the kind of strategy that we have for anything that will keep that memory is to set the request and the limit to be the same value.
Yes.
And this way, you know what it has. There's no kind of like different thing, like different databases on the cluster that are trying to all of them get something. And at the same time, for CPU being having much more like set the limits very well, the request very low and the limits very high. So this way you can just peak as much as you want. Usually, as you're saying, most things we're not running like big data stuff that's like very CPU intensive and just serving web pages.
We've found some workloads that basically, if they don't have a limit set, they'll just eat it up. Yeah, they'll eventually get it. Well, that's got it.
We'll add in there though, be careful with sequence. So for example, guaranteed will always get CPU time shares at once, no matter what. Yeah. And the others don't have limits. Another really important lesson that I have just learned is pay attention to the CPU under forcing that's using CMS quota. If you set those limits, for example, too low and the time isn't available, even if that pod or that container actually uses the time slots that you gave it for that second, 200 milliseconds, it's 10 time slots on board, then even if that time's available, it's not going to fit. Okay. So this is an area, like for example, we had some experience with the pod autoscaler. The Alpha API in particular version of it. One of the differences, one of the things that changed with vertical pod autoscaling is initially you targeted a group of pods with a selector. They changed that now to where you say, I want this to play, or I want this to run. So just to point out that's the difference that you can see. So I'm not sure if they can change that trying to get limits. But what the VPA is really, really good at doing is preempting pods, especially if you have a site deployed with multiple replicas and you're using pod disruption. If you combine those, that actually you get that benefit of pod autoscaling, adjusting to the fluctuations that you need. So, for example, you need less than a minute for memory. Yeah. Identical. Yeah. One other caution I would throw out there is setting a different limit versus request. Is if what happens if you have a couple of pods on the node and all of their limits are higher than the threshold. That can cause pretty bad. That's one of the lessons I was taking that. Sure.
And it depends on the workload, right? So, I mean, yeah, we've found with Nginx, pretty lightweight. We actually don't usually set limits at all, but we pile quite a few on there. We do have sort of node limits and monitoring around that. But something like, unless it's into a heavy workload, we just want to have dedicated resources. So, I mean, Prometheus is another one can be quite memory heavy. So, I mean, you may as well just lock that out. You know it's going to use it. So, yeah.
I think that whole conversation recently that's been forcing a lot of good business conversations with clients, because it makes your clients get very real about what their expectations are. I've had a conversation most recently with a client that like they're trying to score work, right, for a product that we manage for them, and they want all kinds of high availability, and they want promises on nines, and they want all sorts of RPO and RTO guaranteed, and it's like, it makes it real. You can engineer that in Kubernetes pretty easily. It's just they have to be willing to pay for it. I think this has all just pulled the the wool is no longer over anybody's eyes about like what's behind the veil.
And it's not only like compute; it's actually like bandwidth between zones and all that sort of stuff that adds up. It's gotta get real about high availability and what it means, especially inter-region clusters.
Yeah.
That
But we've been able to like up the floor, like the you have to have conversations about what the ceiling is, but also like the floor has come up quite a bit for us. Like all of our clients now like are on regional persistent disks. So like even if they're only running in one zone at a time, like if that node goes down in the middle of the night, it just gets rescheduled to a different zone, and like they're getting that for free.
Free nines, I think, is cheaper now than it was 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, yeah, and we don't even guarantee it, but our clients get it.
We're talking about resource allocation, and I know quite a few people are using Google Cloud. Yeah. When you provision a cluster, there's also a few things that already come in the cluster. DNS, Metrics, and these kind of things. And they have, like, each of them seems to have a different way of auto-scaling and setting resources dynamically. Have you found a way to manage all of them in a consistent way? Because it's like the resource that are set, it kind of scales with the cluster, but we've seen that it wasn't always sufficient. And sometimes, especially with these kind of like support services, you just want to make sure that they always run.
What was insufficient?
I think, to clarify, you're talking about add-ons that are using, I guess what they call the add-on resizer sidecar?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I think it was, I can't remember. I think it was QDNS that was actually constantly using more than requested, and so we knew that, like, well, if the load on the cluster in general were to get pretty high, it would be slowing down or not getting enough. And these are, and didn't want to mess too much with things that are supposed to work automatically. But yeah, so I don't know if anybody has had any issues with that.
We actually had one with the metric server. It was the offsite and out of memory hills.
Okay.
So that add-on is not directly a Google product. It's part of actually the cluster autoscaling project.
Yeah.
It's in there. And the way I at least understand it, it's meant to allow you to scale up the resources needed by that add-on as a proportion in nodes.
Yep.
Those coefficients of what you get per is configurable and complex.
So, do you even know, like, how it gets, what provisions it into the cluster?
This is GKE.
This G. Yeah, okay.
I believe they're using the add-on master manager.
Okay. It just, it's like, yeah, there's these things, and I'm not exactly sure exactly how they're working. So.
Yeah, I mean, that add-on resizer is a bit unusual, but yeah, it has that baseline and then per node add-ons. I mean, we did modify it for Prometheus. It's one of those things that you just got to work out how it works. But I mean, the defaults for that I don't seem are correct. They're very low compared to what the usage is. It totally depends what workloads you're running on the cluster, so they don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be great if they do end up enhancing that further to not only just build its nodes, but for if you're writing a custom reconciler that has an employment cache, that will grow as cluster scale.
Yeah.
Watching that.
That's right. I mean, if it was based on the number of objects in your cluster, that could be a bit of metric, the number of nodes, because that doesn't really make sense.
Cool. Well, we have about 5 more minutes left. If anybody wants to get in any last questions.
Jumping out of pure Kubernetes management, it's super interesting. I would also want to hear from you about more Drupal-oriented deployment on Kubernetes. Like, what is your experience or your best practice recommendation you can have, at least for us, and probably others are also interested. Anyhow, do the deployment of a website, of Drupal website, plus doing the day 1 and day 2 operations like upgrading the version, backups, restore, this kind of things. Do you have any best practice recommendation tool? Really welcome.
Use the tool that you'll feel comfortable and your team feels comfortable maintaining and building effective.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest like low touch, right? Like take as much of that out of band as possible. Just because you're putting Drupal into Kubernetes, like doesn't mean that you have to change like your backup regime, right? Like do what works for you. Like if you're using a cloud SQL product and you don't need point in time recovery, like let it take care of doing a daily backup for you, right? Or what we're doing for other backups is like we have other services that do backups, right? Like Drupal doesn't have, you don't have to do that inside of Drupal. So like from Drupal's perspective, it doesn't know that it's running in Kubernetes.
Our
right?
cluster and like present version 1.16, we have a snapshot class. We can have a manifest for snapshot. We use that for snapshotting all our services, never mind what they are. That we know most of stuff, but I know you're a set user and stuff. We are using root and step, and there is a self CSI, and it allows us to do a snapshot. We also have a small bot that is scaled down our deployments. We show data consistency across the cluster. We care about it. Care, and then we snapshot. We delete the snapshot except like we can write with snapshot and WordPress sometimes stuff. So we use Rook, Kubernetes 1.16, and snapshot manifest as Kubernetes plus CSI.
Yes, so for backups, actually, we've seen we wanted to have some more control over like what we back up. For example, like what files do you need to back up? What's also when you back up the database, what's like there might be something like you don't even care about backing them up. And we've seen that actually we looked at the different like snapshots and things like that. And in the end, we just created a cron job. It does a good old MySQL dump. We have control over it. We know exactly what it's doing. Fix the dump and put it in object storage. And same thing for files. And simple, it works. You can just like open up the object storage browser and look at your files and download them and do whatever you want with them. So sometimes it doesn't need to be like Kubernetes specific or particularly complicated.
Yeah, I mean, we do some of that, but we use a tool called Restic. It's really nice. It's just like basically an operator that lives in the cluster. You create a backup object, and it just goes and backs up whatever it needs to. It actually has an understanding of what service it needs to back up. So it's a database, or it's a set of files, and when we describe what backup things we need to do, and then you've got an alternative resource called a restore, and it's the same concept. So the backup, if you give snapshot ID and then a restore, and it just dumps it out onto S3. So it's a really simple abstraction into backups.
How do you keep the sync of because Restic, as far as I understand, it's backups file storage, right?
Yep.
How do you keep sync with the database to be on the same level and you don't end up with database having a file already added, but the backup of the files still didn't have it because it was executed 6 hours before, or you just keep the execution running at the same time, or?
Yeah, we do. So I mean, the database, we actually do higher level backups of the database as well. So this is for user access restores and backups. So it's just a point in time SQL dump, and the file system runs on a slightly different schedule. So yeah, you're right. What we normally tell our customers is we do a backup pre-deployment. So part of the deployment rollout actually backs up MySQL and files, and that way you've got a restore point, which is the same time. So that's not normally like our nightly backup system. It currently doesn't run at the same time.
So unfortunately,
Shout out of just yes and no. If anyone needs help to set up their Kubernetes cluster completely as Robert.
Level to set up from meta to
Are you
You want to share some playbooks?
are you talking deep spread?
no. When it started, we did
Deep spread actually is a spray. You spray. Yeah, all over again.
so unfortunately, we're at time. I highly encourage everybody to hop into the Drupal.org Kubernetes Slack if you have questions that you come up with later, or if you want a good group of people to talk to. I mean, this is it. These are the people that are working with Kubernetes and Drupal, at least in Europe, and there's a lot of really smart people in the room. So, encourage you to take advantage of that. It's been nice meeting everybody, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everybody.
By the way, KubeCon Europe 2020 is here.
Absolutely.
And just so everybody knows, we did have Jeff Geerling join and listen in, so
Oh.
hopefully he heard most of that.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I did.